welcome in now Jeff Nowak, Odyssey Sports.
Jeff, you and I have talked about this. This is a meat and potatoes draft. You're going to have 6, maybe 7 receivers going round 1. I don't know if you'll see a running back going round 1. I know you'll see no tight end going round 1. Intrigue certainly happen at quarterback, but boy, what they got up front, where 3 of the top 7 or 8 picks are going to be offensive linemen. You got a bunch of defensive linemen, edge guys. That is the story of this draft when it's all going to be said and done. And not only in round 1, I was telling you this, man, it was tough for me to leave Travis Jones out of my first round from Connecticut. Because, man, I think he's a guy that could really play and play well in the NFL, but I couldn't find the right fit. And they got depth there where people like Phil Matheson, Neil Farrell, into the mid to latter part of round 3. There's a lot of depth here along the defensive line. And offensive line, those tackles are going to go quickly. So unless you want one of those 3, you better get in the top 7 or 8. That's where this draft's going to be defined.
Yeah, it's a tough draft to gauge outside of the first round until we see the first round happen, because I think it's a draft where there is a lot of smoke screening going on regarding the quarterback position specifically. And until we see just how much teams are valuing quarterbacks in the quarterback class this year, we're not going to know where those players fall, right? I think the Saints are a good example of that. A lot of people are saying they could trade up. There's reports that, there are trades there to be made, and it's just a question of whether they want to take them. And if you're the Saints, whether you're interested in a quarterback or not, you want people to think you are, because if you're not interested in a quarterback, you want a run on quarterbacks, because that's just every quarterback taken is a position player outside of the quarterback position that drops one spot further down the board. It's really tough. Is Kenny Pickett a first-round quarterback? I'm not sure there is a starting quarterback in this draft. I've said that a few times. I know you put up a mock today. You had a couple quarterbacks coming off, and I think that's, probably the likely scenario where you see a Malik Willis, you see a Kenny Pickett. I know you threw Matt Corral in the first round. And I think that's going to be, how much do the Saints value the quarterback class, and how much do other teams value the quarterback class? Because there's a lot of teams that could be drafting a quarterback, and I'm just not sure this is the year.
Yeah, Jeff, I think the Who That Nation would be bitching if somehow they would package and go get a quarterback. I don't care if it's Malik Willis or Kenny Pickett. They'd be like, what?
Right.
No, we need to give Jameis Winston a chance, and then we'll figure it out after the 2022 season. And don't you agree with this? I think they'd have no problem. You look with a 16-19 pick, if you stay pat, whether it be tackle, receiver, or wide receiver, tackle, however it unfold, I think the Who Dat Nation would say, okay, we did a good job, and we're expecting those 2 guys to contribute for the 2022 season.
Jeff, wouldn't you say there's a better chance the Saints would move up for a particular tackle much more than a quarterback?
Yes, that's what I would think.
That's my opinion.
I agree with that completely. If they're trading up, it's because they don't like their placement in the tackle market, and they want to go get a guy that they have faith in, whether they like Trevor Penning, if he falls there, or maybe the tackle that's coming off the board. And like I said, if the quarterbacks don't come off the board, right, that's where the Saints can get into trouble in the 16 spot. If everyone's kind of bluffing on the quarterback position and none come off prior to 16, well, that means that more players outside the quarterback position are coming off. And a lot of times those players will be the tackles, So that's where I see it. But I don't think that this trade the Saints made was about packaging and going up. I think it's about, you have a first-year head coach. You want to get him, quality players wherever you can get them, just to add weapons, add pieces this year. Bobby, here's a stat for you that I know you're going to like this stat. I looked it up today on a whim, and it panned out. So the Saints have had 2 first-round picks 4 separate times in the Mickey Loomis era, that's dating back to 2002 as a GM. During that time, they have picked skill position players, so that would be, quarterback, wide receiver, running back, on the defensive side, you're talking cornerback, defensive back, linebacker. They've picked 10 of them. 4 of those picks have come in the seasons where they had 2 first-round picks. So in those you had, 2017, you had Marshawn Lattimore, so that would be your skill position player. In 2015, you had Stephon Anthony. That would be your skill position player. In 2011, you had Mark Ingram. In 2002, you had Dante Stallworth. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think when you have those 2 picks, you see a team that likes to build through the lines, but suddenly they have that extra pick to play with, and they like to use it on the skill position. I say all of this as kind of a indicator that there is a trend here that would suit the, kind of wide receiver or nothing crowd pretty well, which is, if they stay pat and they don't trade, I expect that second pick or maybe the first pick, one of those two picks, to be used at a skill position.
Yeah, no question. I think, Jeff, one of the things is that the safety spot, which, I really love Daxton Hill.
From Michigan, yeah.
I got him going to Tampa, which it would really aggravate me if he goes to Tampa because of the fact that's a big need area for them. Somebody that could play the slot. He's played free safety. He's played corner. That'd be perfect. And what happens after Hill? Because you have Jalen Petrie from Baylor, Joaquin Brisker, Lewis Cine from Georgia, who is a really, really good player. That, you would hope that you could get your shot at one of those guys in the second round. I'm not talking about Hill because I think he's a first-round guy. But if it's Jalen Petrie, I think Lewis Cine's gone also. But either Brisker or Petrie potentially being there in round 2.
Yeah, I don't think the value is going to be there at safety when you get on the board at 19. It's just safety's just not a position you see heavily drafted in the first round for good reason. I mean, Jamal Adams obviously is a good example of a guy that went high, but you saw I can't remember, was it the Jets that drafted him? They unloaded him fast.
And Seattle gave
up
a
drafting
ton.
a running back up high. It's tough. It's the value, equation when you're paying top dollar for a safety or running back is difficult. So I think that that's a position where, and you floated this idea, and I think that if anything, you're looking at a trade, I could see the Saints trying to trade back a couple spots, maybe get some extra value, and that's where you get that safety. But, the reports are there's a lot of teams trying to trade back. So I'm just not sure if the deal would be there to do it. But Lewis Cine is a guy I think is a really intriguing prospect. And it's really just a question of what you see in Marcus May. Like, you're going to have a free safety somewhere, and maybe that's Tyrann Mathieu. If you're not going wide receiver in the draft, maybe it's because you're hoping to sign Jarvis Landry, and you're doing it after the draft because then it won't count against the comp pick formula, right?
Yeah,
correct.
So that's where I think you're going to get some really interesting options. I still think it's got to be a wide receiver, just because of the names on the board, if they are there. If a guy like Chris Olave makes it to 16 or 19, you have to take a real long look. And you have a defensive head coach now. And that's the biggest change for me. And I think it'll be interesting to see how the structure shifts in terms of how the Saints pass. Because I think so much of what was happening with in the last few years with the Saints was you have an offensive wizard head coach who's comfortable developing prospects at the wide receiver position. He doesn't feel like you need to draft heavily at that position because he's comfortable in his ability to get the most out of wide receivers. Whether that was a good decision and whether it worked out is another conversation, but I think that's what you were seeing. Now with a defensive head coach, I wouldn't be surprised at all if you see a lot more aggressive takes on how they're trying to bring in what players at the wide receiver position. So I've been kind of all along on the, it feels like a guy like Trevor Penning, a tackle at 16 and a wide receiver at 19. Just feels like this is the year where need meets value in that regard because the wide receivers are there, the tackles are there, and if you can get them, it just makes too much sense not to do it.
Do y'all think Malik Willis or Kenny Pickett's as good as Mac Jones? I don't.
I think Mac Jones would be a top 6 or 7 pick in this.
Well, I mean, last year you had a really, really, really strong class of quarterbacks, right? This year you have a very weak class of quarterbacks. Here's a better way to look at it. Where would Kenny Pickett or Malik Willis be drafted if they were in last year's field? Would they be the 6th, 7th quarterback off the board? Because I think they would be.
They'd be second round, maybe early third.
Right.
Hello.
Exactly. So is the reason you're drafting a quarterback in the first round just because they're the top quarterback of this class, or is it because you think they're a first-round quarterback?
Desperation.
And I think you just have a spectacularly weak quarterback class this year, and whether Malik Willis can be a starting quarterback and be a good starting quarterback is kind of notwithstanding to the larger picture of what's the actual value of that pick? Are you drafting him there because he's a quarterback, or are you drafting him there because you see, the NFL skill set? And that's a question that is, I think a lot of teams are posturing that they think that's true. But I think if it's the Saints doing that, I almost feel like it's because they want a team like the Panthers to not take a tackle, right?
Right. And take a quarterback.
So, yeah.